Hi, you're listening to Our Voice Now Humanities team. I'm Sarah Applegate.
And I'm Andy Bell. Tonight, our guest is Sheila Applegate. Sheila Applegate has a master's degree in social work. She is also an award-winning author of Enchanted One, The Portal to Love. Sheila's passion is to provide a forum for people to process emotion and integrate spiritual understanding into their daily lives.
In March of this year, Sheila, along with Zac Hansen, were spontaneously gifted with a new energy technique called Fractal Illumination. Since then, they have explored the multidimensional aspects of this powerful technique, which is much more than a healing. Fractal Illumination ignites and illuminates the evolution process within. They will be offering their first Fractal Illumination gathering this August. Welcome, Sheila, and thank you for being on our show tonight.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to join you on this show. I'm happy to be here.
So you said that you were spontaneously gifted with this technique. Can you tell us how that happened?
Sure. And I know that, I've been on your show before and you read my bio, so people have probably a little understanding about my background, but I do want to start this explanation by just reminding people that communicating with spirit and working with energy work is something that I've been doing for a long time. So what happened to me on this night that was very notable isn't as far out of the spectrum as it may be for the average person. But having said that, and having been a healer and energy worker for quite some time and communicating with spirit, one night, March 2nd, I remember the date because it was a very profound evening, but I was just sitting at the dining room table with Zac, and we were just chatting and talking about different things, and I had this crystal in front of me that was sitting there, and it's a fairly large crystal. It's a Lemurian crystal, and I've had it for years. In fact, I had two of them and gifted one to a friend, and so it was in someone else's house. But this one was in front of me, and while we were chatting, I picked up the crystal, and I put it up to my third eye in the center of my forehead. And I really wasn't thinking about what I was doing. I was just sort of playing around, I guess, and I just sort of stuck it up there, and I started moving it around, and even while we were in the conversation, I started to notice that I could see and feel a beam of light coming from this crystal into different parts of my brain, and when I would move the crystal and aim it in different directions, I would feel it igniting into a different section of my brain, and it got to a point where it was distracting me from the conversation. I was, becoming very fascinating with this experience. So I told Zac what was going on, and he said, well, try it on me. So I put the crystal up to his head and started doing the same thing, and what I noticed is that when I aimed it in his head, I could actually feel it in my own in the place where I was aiming it on his, and it was opening up different passageways. So the evening went on, and I had a vision first of a shaman that came to help me go through the evening, and then of this huge galactic being. And so I was in a pretty altered, you would say almost a deep meditative state for the rest of the night, in which I was just being downloaded a tremendous amount of information from these beings. So it sounds very out there, and it was very out there even for me, but I did want to just kind of prerequisite with that. The experience of communicating with spirit and working with energy is something I had a foundation for when this came in.
That's just so amazing, that whole process, and that, it really had such a profound effect, and it was such a monumental thing. My question is, why do you think that this knowledge of this healing came at the time it did instead of some other time?
I think that is, like everything, multidimensional. I think that the combination of my energy with Zac, and we've learned that this technique is something we do together, and I think that the combination of our energy together amplified it, and he brought some energies with him that were not energies that I was used to working with. As much as I've been working with the different frequencies, I haven't worked that much with galactic beings. So I think he brought an element to the picture that was new to me and opened up a space for me to experience this. But I also think that it has to do with the world evolution and where we are as a world in our evolution, in our consciousness, and the shifts that are happening at such an extreme level right now. Because as I got to work with this, and obviously I've been working with this energy, and there's a whole much more that we'll talk about as I got to know it more and learn it more, but one of the things I've come to understand is that it actually helps to upgrade or kind of activate the DNA, the aspects of the DNA that haven't been activated before, and upgrade us on a cellular level to prepare for the higher dimension energies that our world is moving into. So I think it's multifaceted, that it had to do with my own preparation, the union of our energies coming together, and then where the world is right now in its receptiveness and need for this.
That's very interesting. And you've talked about how the combination of your two different energies helped create this, but do you think all the energy just comes from with you, or where do you think this energy comes from exactly?
Well, like I said, it feels a little bit more galactic to me in its energy. I've worked a lot with ascended masters in creation energy, creator energy, God energy. I think we're all one. All energy comes from source, and no matter which aspect of this that we connect to, it definitely still relates back to oneness. And everything that I bring through me, of course, I make sure is in the frequency of divine love, and that it is for the highest good of all concerned. So I do believe that it is really the same creation energy or divine love or oneness that I've been working with all along, but that it also comes through this different aspect of it that gives it just a slightly different frequency in its vibration that allows me to work with people in a way that's needed right now that maybe hasn't been needed before. So when I started working with it, I came to understand this big being that was kind of guiding me through the night and teaching me about it, just had that different frequency to him that, like I said, felt more galactic or almost sci-fi in the imagery that I was getting as opposed to the imagery that I'm used to getting. And I've come to identify that as a being called Ashtar, who is working in the world to help us move forward too. And then I also recognized within that same frequency and coming forward more was the energy of Metatron, which is another archangel who is very powerful and has been working with our world for a long time. And Metatron is actually an energy that I'm familiar with, so the combination of the two made it safe for me to explore it more. But when I circle back and think about the earlier days, like way before this came in, I think that Metatron had actually been preparing me for it about 7 or 8 years ago. He was very much working with me, and I used to call it the Metatron mind melt, because he would stick his hand on my head and it would be like my whole brain would just relax and kind of go into that white silence and calm down. And so I realized that there was aspect of his energy in this work too as I started working with the brain frequencies for the first time.
And that's really cool. And
yeah,
you know, it makes me wonder, like, just the way you describe it to me sounds, it's because it's a different than energies that you've worked with before, you're saying, and the way you describe it and the names and stuff to me sounds more futuristic. And I mean, using sci-fi usually gives that idea of future to people, but I think all the words you use to describe it sound more future than when you talk about things like creation, energy, and the like ascended masters and things like that, it has, I mean, it's not passed in a negative way, but it just has an older feel to it, where the words you described for this seem to be more futuristic. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I can tell exactly what you're saying and feel what you're saying there, and I think that's part of the excitement of this. The energies that I've worked with, though very evolved and constantly moving and definitely part of our future and the evolution, they have an ancient connection to them that's associated with Earth. So I think they've been connected to the Earth energy for so long, and they hold sort of the frequencies and the memories of where our past has been. And, of course, they also hold within them the energies of our future. But this comes in a little bit more clean in its connection to Earth. It doesn't have its energy tied to our storyline. It seems to have its energy tied to a different space that perhaps is further along on the continuum than we are. So it's exciting and new. I agree with you.
So, at the beginning, when you were describing how you kind of discovered it, you did mention that you used a crystal and your chakras. But can you explain a little more how fractal illumination works and the specifics and mechanics of it?
Sure, because of course it moved from that day and me getting a download of all this information, because then I had to sort of integrate it, process it, and realize and figure out how I would apply it to work with others. One of the things is that crystal, which I wanted to kind of circle back, which was pretty cool. This crystal that had been in my house for years, I looked down at it during the night, and I noticed that it all of a sudden had all of these gold flakes in it that had never been there before. I don't exactly know what that means, but the crystal itself changed in its frequency, and that was kind of an exciting part of the whole process as well. And I had my friend check his crystal at his house, and it didn't change. But then a few weeks later, he brought it to my house, and he looked at it when he left his house, and there were no gold flakes. And as soon as he walked through my door into my healing room, he looked down again, and it was filled with gold flakes in it. So there's some pretty cool things that happened around it. But originally, when I first started working with it, it's funny because my dog was the third. So Zac had me try it on him, and then he's like, well, try it on the dog. So we tried it on the dog because that's who was there that night. And then my kids didn't really want me trying this thing on it, because at that point I was explaining it like as brain surgery or something, and it wasn't going over well with them. But then I started working with it with clients that knew me and trusted me and were coming in for sessions anyway. I said, I have this new technique, and so I just sort of started doing with them, and it's all about the brain, not necessarily the chakras, though it was the third eye was the entry point. And then there's another entry point that is at the crown chakra. So I guess those two chakras are definitely focal points of it. The crystals they're kind of big, and it was kind of getting difficult to put it on people's third eye. So I asked to move it down to a smaller crystal, and then asked to learn to do it with just my hand. So now what happens is that I use the three fingers, and I connect to this energy. And there's what I've noticed as it evolved and I learned to work with it, that it tends to have three phases. And the first phase was sort of what I described to you, where this beam of light goes into different parts of the brain, and I literally feel it on the other person. I feel it in my own brain. That's how I can understand it and analyze it and work with it, is because I just start moving it around, and then I feel a spot, and something releases. And it depends. Once in a while, I will get a flash of somebody's memory. So if there's a spot in their brain where a memory is being held that is needing to be released, I don't get the whole story the way I do with a reading. I just get a flash, and then that memory clears itself for them. And by clearing those memories, it clears different patterns in their lives. And so I call the first phase sort of like cranial cranial meaning the brain, acupuncture, because it's almost like I literally go in and hit pressure points in the brain to get the energy flowing. And then in that same phase, what I noticed is that it started to bring the two hemispheres of the brain into harmony. I've done a lot of work with bringing the heart chakra and the head into harmony, the mind and the heart into harmony with each other. This is sort of just a different angle of doing that, because we think of the left brain as being very logical, linear, male energy, and the right brain as being the creative, heart-centered, feminine energy. So what started happening is that this beam of light started to blend and harmonize the two hemispheres of the brain to allow people to actually think and move forward in more of a harmonized way with those two aspects of thinking. So that's the first phase. And then what happened as I moved on with people, so a lot of times, and this is now done in groups, but a lot of times it's like a three-phase thing. And the second phase was pretty cool, because as I started to explore and clear the levels for people, I noticed and I found what looked to me at first like a little chip deep inside the brain. And it's kind of like this little blue cell that it seemed like I couldn't really read it, but it seemed like it just was layered with sacred geometry, and it would release and it would start moving around the brain. Like, have you ever seen one of those like vacuum cleaners, those little round vacuum cleaners that go around a room, and when they bump into something they turn and move in another direction?
Roomba?
It was Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was kind of doing that in the brain, and it sort of just took on its own way of just like kind of going around and clearing and reprogramming for the people the brain waves. And then then it began to replicate, and it just kept replicating into just more and more and more, and moving through the body, almost like a dialysis, where it was replacing the old cells, and these new higher tech cells we're moving into that space. And so the third phase is when it starts to flow almost like a dialysis, where these high frequency cells start to replace the older cells or cleanse them. That's the three phases.
Sounds really cool.
It's been really fun to learn and explore, because it's not something I've read in a book, or it's just this great adventure of exploring it, and then listening and hearing the feedback from people and how it's impacting them. It's been really an exciting process.
Yeah, sounds really cool. And could you tell us why it's called Fractal Illumination?
Yeah, and you know what, when I first got it, I think it was that first night I started hearing Fractal Illumination. And of course that was when we were playing Frozen in our house all the time. So I thought, at first I was like, okay, it's just because you're hearing the word fractal all the time, and you're just, it's just in your head. And I really kind of let it go, and I kept trying to figure out, kind of with my mind or tuning into spirit, trying to figure out, describe it, asking people who had received it to give me ideas of what they thought it should be called, because it really wasn't something that was here. And then when that disc split and went into multiple reflections of it, I knew that Fractal Illumination was it made sense, because a fractal is actually a replica, an exact replica. So with this chip, I call it a chip, but it's a cell, it's a disc, it's this energy disc. That's a replica of creation, and that's found within the brain, and then that replicates itself over and over into fractals. So when it spreads out into those tiny little cells of it, it's the exact replication of source, of the large source energy. that's what a fractal actually is in layman's terms. I'm sure a physicist would give you a better description, but in layman's terms, that's what a fractal is. And they're illuminated. They're like this beautiful kind of snow crystal blue illuminated energy that moves through the body at that point. So that I got the name of it, then I explored it, and then I understood the name, and that's when I moved forward with it.
That's super cool, and I feel like that's such a fitting name, and the whole Frozen thing is very funny. But no, it does make perfect sense that that is actually what it is. So this is a very unique healing method, but who can benefit from this technique the most, or who does it really aimed for?
Well, you know what? I tend to attract people who are pretty far on their path of enlightenment or awareness. And I know that everybody that I've worked with has really responded very well to it and can really, understand. And it's not a mental thing where they have to think about those different layers, but they really receive all of those different layers. But I think that, so people who are on the verge, people who have been doing this work, who know that we're moving into the higher dimensions of evolution, and they're feeling kind of the body symptoms as they're trying to transfer their energy into these frequencies, or they're just, trying to really live from that space, I think they absolutely benefit tremendously from it. But I think that what I found is that those earlier stages, that sort of cranial acupuncture, helps people move to those phases as well. So while someone in a group setting may be more focused and feeling the first phase, where it's clearing patterns for them and opening up, all three phases during their group session do get imprinted into their brain, into their energy field. So as they move forward, they'll be activated whether I'm there or not. You could come back for sessions, but really by being present in a single session, which does the three phases, those are then imprinted within you, and as you move along on your journey, you will be supported by them. So really, everybody would benefit from it, everybody will benefit from it. So I guess it really comes down to if it resonates with someone, if the language is comfortable enough. I wouldn't want anyone to come into it that was uncomfortable with it, but as long as someone is open to receive it, they're going to get what they need at that level that they're at.
That's cool, and it makes sense, and it sounds very user-friendly. And yeah. You're offering your first public Fractal Illumination gathering in August. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, and I'm saying it's the first public one because, like I said, I was exploring this energy. I first did it on individuals, but early on I was instructed that this was to be a group process, that the benefit of the group coming together supports it, and that so many people need this that it's just also more efficient to be able to offer it in groups. And again, the setting of that group amplifies it for everyone else. And so what I did is to move from the individual work into the group work. I called together some of the people who had been working with me, invitation only, and made sure that Zac and I, because Zac is actually there acting as an amplifier and helping navigate the energy while I do this, especially in the group. So we called together a group of people and got their feedback and moved through the process by invitation only. But in August, we will be doing our first open to the public event. And we found that doing it in nature is really helpful whenever possible. So the first one we did outside in my backyard, and we're now at the Beatty Sanctuary in Cazenovia, New York on August 2nd from 2 to 4. We're offering the first Fractal Illumination gathering that is open to anyone. We've just put it up. It's up on the website now, and the information to register for that you can find there if you're in the local area. Or it's actually in a beautiful, the sanctuary is this beautiful gardens and these outside paths, and the nature really seems to support this, and so it's also a bed and breakfast. So if you are wanting to travel and receive this, it's a beautiful space to be able to stay at overnight and to receive this during that Saturday afternoon.
Sounds like a great opportunity. And we're close to the end of the time, but first I want to ask you, is there a way to receive this long distance for people who aren't in the area?
There absolutely is. I have done it long distance. Of course, before I announced it to the public, I wanted to test every avenue and make sure that I felt completely up to par with that. So I have done that with people long distance. I am sure that we will be putting something out to do that over the phone or energetically to gather people. I haven't put that out to the world yet as far as creating a gathering, but that's something that we absolutely can do. Of course, I love the opportunity when we come together in physical world groups, but I know that, though we're willing to travel and be hosted in different towns, if people feel like they have a group of people in their area that would be open to this, they can contact us. The website you can use is SheilaApplegate.com, and when you go to Fractal Illumination on the website under services, then it gives you information if you want to host us in your town to do this work. But I like to make everything accessible because of the clients around the world, so I do intend to have something up in a long-distance way in the near future, too.
And like I said, we're almost out of time. So thank you so much for being on our show tonight. And before we go, could you tell people a little bit about how they can learn more about this?
Absolutely. It's both on my website and on Zac's website. My website, again, is SheilaApplegate.com. And if you go to the service page of my website, you'll have a drop-down, and it'll tell you about Fractal Illumination. There's a lot of testimonials out there on it. I felt like that was important, bringing something new into the world. I think people want to hear not only my impression of it, but what other people are experiencing. So that's probably the best space to find out about that. And then if you have any questions, there's a contact form there.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I absolutely love being on Our Voice Now with both of you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And remember, you can like us on Facebook at Our Voice Now Humanities Team. Thank you.
Have a wonderful week.